Yeah, so it's absolutely a pleasure to be here. And yeah, as you can see my logo, it's got the brain on it. And I've got my friend here, which we're going to be talking a bit about today. So I'm a neuro leadership and emotional intelligence consultant. And Faustina did say that we should kind of give us a story. And I'm going to cut it really short into how I got into neuro leadership. Neuro leadership is really brain-based leadership. And I went through a period where I set up a business, in fact, the first hair and beauty salon in Kent that catered for Afro hair. And 4 years later, I had to close it or sell it, but I sold it for a loss and I felt like a failure. But that, I always say God has a sense of humor. I said that period, I will never run a business again. But in the process of going through the challenges I went through at the time, I previously had worked in medical research, and I think my research brain kicked back in. And I started asking the question about how we behave the way we do. The way I was feeling, how would I get out of it? How would I get out of the valley that I literally found myself in? Emotionally, mentally, physically, in different ways. And I started researching neuroscience, and that's what led me to neuroscience. So our topic today is rebalancing our lives through emotional intelligence. And this is exactly what I had to do at the time. Learn to rebalance my life, learn to literally get it out of the dump it was and rebalance it. And the key for me, what I discovered was the power of the brain, that we had to take back control of the brain. But what got me so excited in the process was that everything that science was showing us at the time was confirming scripture for me. I'm a Christian, and it just blew my mind that, wow, this is just amazing. So that is exactly what led me to this. And I fortunately have been able to use it to do so much work in organizations, helping them drive behavior change, but also helping individuals understand how their brain works so that they can maximize their own brain to achieve what they want. And for me, it's really becoming limitless, because that is what we were created to be. So I'll start with this and just ask the question, which of these resonates with you? I know we don't have time, so I'm just going to let it stay there for a few seconds. And I'm sure out of this, you'll be able to identify some of them that resonate with you. And with all of us, this is what, we go through a lot of this most of the time. And the way to change a lot of the crises that we've been through, or issues that we encounter in life, or what we've just come through in the last pandemic, because you see, what we've gone through has kind of shaken quite a lot of us, or shaken the world, literally. But the interesting thing is, I found a lot of people asking the question, what do I do now? People are beginning to really think about themselves, kind of putting themselves first, which is exactly a great place to be. Because in the past, everybody, it's that rat race. But because everyone had to stop, a lot of people are now asking the question. And this is what I really want to base this talk on. To help us rebalance, we've got to really stop and take stock and really ensure that we are actually going on the path that we want to go for. But most importantly, understanding where are we going? What is the path? What are we doing? And it's being intentional about what we want to do. So it's the key is to learn, first and foremost, who we are, what we want, and where we're going. And I'm going to start by saying that one of the main things to do, because to be able to change anything, you've got to first and foremost understand what's going on in the brain and change that. And that's the whole process of learning how to rewire your brain so that you can live your desired reality. And I've just got a picture of the brain, which I'm not going to go into so much, but the key part of my talk today is this frontal part of the brain, which is here. And inside the brain, which is that emotional center, which is just right deep in here. And the main thing is that the emotional center of the brain, I'll go back and say the main thing about the brain is all it's trying to do is to protect us, keep us safe, so that any thought process that comes into our brain or that is in the brain is connected to this emotional center, so that when we have a thought, what it does is activates it, and then it scans the brain to see if it's got that or something similar in memory. And if it does, depending on if it's negative or positive, it will then activate the brain. And usually if it's negative, it will then kick off our flight, or freeze mechanism. And the first place that it goes to take oxygen from or energy from to be able to use is the prefrontal cortex, which is the frontal part of the brain, which is the part of the brain where we make decisions, where we're able to solve problems, where we're able to really think properly. And that's why when we're stressed, anxious about anything, immediately we are not rational. We don't make the right decisions, or we kind of literally go blank. And some of us might have experienced it, going for an interview after you've prepared, get there, ask you questions and you don't remember anything. It happened to me, and that's exactly why that happens. So I always say that the brain is literally like a computer. But the problem is that, like a computer, it's what you put into it that it processes. With the brain, what you put into it is what it processes, but it also can reconfigure using what we've put into it to reconfigure and come up with something completely new and different. And that's why I said the brain is so imaginative. So if we don't control it, it will control us. And that's the key here, that we need to take that control back. And one of the things I just wanted to point out in this diagram is that you can see the bridge in this diagram that shows where the bridge between the left and the right brain. Because a lot of time we go, am I right brain, am I left brain? The fact is that they're so closely linked. But in specific areas of the brain, you would have specific neurons that release hormones, like the frontal part, the frontal right. In fact, the right part is to do a lot with emotions and relationship, because you tend to find a lot of dopamine and estrogen there, while the left side is more to do with the logic, languages. And that's because on the left side, you have serotonin in front a lot and testosterone at the back. And that's what drives it. But the fact is that they're really closely linked. Having said that, the main thing that joins the brains together, this corpus callosum, is thicker in women, but I won't go into that structural difference today because Faustina has given me only 10 minutes. So the other thing here is one other thing I want to point out here is this diagram of the iceberg, which, if you don't remember anything about my talk, just remember this anytime you're having a emotional center hijack. The observed part of the iceberg is like our conscious brain, which is that prefrontal cortex. And the bottom part, which is 90% of the iceberg, are all the things beneath. And this is exactly how our brain is. So that bit beneath is like our subconscious brain. So that is the bit that stores all the information from our childhood, from what we observed, from things we heard parents say, from things we are taking from social media, from things our friends said. All those are being taken in, stored in memory, in our subconscious brain, and then they come out as our values and beliefs, our experiences, genetic traits, cultural background, and all that. Genetic traits, I'll point out something really quickly because it's a question people tend to ask. Yes, we can have genes of different things. Like, one example is you can have genes about, diabetes and all that. But it's our lifestyle, our thought process that will determine if those genes get switched on or off. And I use my mom as an example. My mom always said that in her family, diabetes ran. And she always said that she's never going to get it. She was a woman of faith. And she stood on that faith and said that she said she would never get diabetes. My mother died with no trace of diabetes. So it's our lifestyle, our beliefs that can switch on a lot of those genes. So one of the things that I created that I'd been running before the pandemic was a training that I did on how to really take control of your life, plan it, and set the right goals based on how the brain works. In the pandemic, it became so, and there was a lot of demand for it because people were asking the questions. I want to do something different, but I don't know how to start. I don't know, I want to set goals, but not really sure how. Or people, as you know, we set goals, set New Year's resolutions, but within 3 months, it's all gone out of the window. And that's because we set goals without having the brain in mind. So I created this framework, which is based on these 4 aspects: the self-discovery, reframe your mind, reset yourself, and reform your life. The self-discovery literally is based on knowing who you are. It's understanding yourself first, understanding your values, your vision. Without that, setting a goal with somewhere down the line, you will abandon it when things change or life happens. So one thing I use is this tool known as the brain mapping tool. When I work with people to first and foremost start off that self-discovery journey, because what you see here, and this just shows, because some of us might have done personality profiles, I don't believe in them because they kind of tell you this is the way you are, this is not, it's a pros or cons, black or white, but our brain doesn't work that way. Our brain keeps changing, keeps rewiring. If we look at all your brains at the beginning of my talk and at the end, structurally, it would have changed. The neurons you see different wiring that has occurred. That is exactly the way we are. So what this shows is this red line is showing someone's preferred behavior pattern, the way they've wired themselves over time. But based on either their role or job, they're now adapting that behavior pattern. And here you can see a massive gap here. When there's a gap away from, when you adapt far below your preferred behavior pattern, it will cause a lot of frustration. When you adapt above it, that is where you tend to find people shouting, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm burnout. So if you don't understand yourself or even understand the people you're leading, then most of the time I tell leaders, you're speaking English, they're hearing Greek. And that is exactly how it is in relationships, even with husband and wives or different spouses. So this quote by Swindle says, people who soar are those who refuse to sit back, sigh, and wish things would change. They neither complain of their lot nor passively dream of some distant ship coming in. Rather, they visualize in their minds that they are not, that they are not quitters. They will not allow life circumstances to push them down and hold them under. With the pandemic, one of the things that really got people was the lockdown, the uncertainty, and that is natural. Our brain does not like change. It doesn't like uncertainty. And that is why when people are going through change, they resist it. When you're going through uncertainty, it freaks you out. That's because it's new to the brain and it doesn't like it. So what we need to do is to take that control back and create. In fact, what I tell people during the pandemic is create your own certainty within your own scope and forget about what you can control. Control what you can control. So the question comes back to, who am I? And one of the questions is asking yourself, how well do you really know yourself? And how are you going to show up every day based on who you are? Our intentions and focus are their strongest when our goals align with our deepest life choices and values. But if you don't know what those are, then you're literally going through life, either living other people's life, living the way you think you're expected to live, or not doing what you really want to do because you don't even know what you want to do. So one of the exercises I tell people is, first and foremost, start by listing your characteristics. In a longer workshop, I would have said, I'll give you 3 minutes to start doing it. And what I tend to find is people struggle to even start. When they get in flow, they are fine. But initially, it's a massive struggle. So just, in your own time, do this exercise and see what comes through, because it will help you to start really looking after yourself. I know we've seen this diagram. How many minutes? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
You're over your time, but
Okay, okay, I'll stop now. I'll stop. Yeah, so I'll just end with this really. This diagram, I think it was Ruth that showed it previously. I can't remember. But we've seen it, and it says all our knowledge has its origins in perceptions. And the thing that I love is a quote that says that we see the world not as it is, but as we are. So you see the world not as it is, but as you are. You see the world based on what is going on in your own brain. And that is so important. So the question is, how do you see yourself? And I think that is the one takeaway that you need to start looking at. The framework that I have will help you. Just look at those 4 things and start asking yourself the questions. How do I see myself? And if you want to know more, I've got an academy, an online academy. It's called the Mindsight Academy. Mindsight. You can have a look there. It's got a lot more information. Or look at you can go onto my podcast, Lead to Excel podcast, Spotify, Google, Apple, anywhere you find it. And I talk a lot on this. So it's really a pleasure having a chat with you. And I failed this challenge because I still had a lot more to talk about for 10 minutes. But I hope you really got the nuts of this whole gist today. And it's a pleasure. Thanks again, Faustina, for inviting me. And I'll stop sharing.